With the sun glinting on its silver-gray sides and the 4 huge swastikas glinting on its fins, it circled once over Manhattan and then headed for its berth at Lakehurst. With a crack, the ship buckled. For an instant, the Hindenburg seemed a rearing reptile, darting its tongue in anger. Then it was a gigantic halfback, tackled behind the knees and falling forward on its face. Silhouetted by the Holocaust, passengers began dropping out of the windows like peas from a colander.
From its earliest days, Time has held a fascination with science and medicine. And of course, it gave full reports on the major breakthroughs. Dr. Jonas Salk rated a cover story when he introduced his polio vaccine in 1954. And so did Dr. Christian Bernard following his first successful heart transplant surgery in 1967. But from the very start, it was the little offbeat stories of science and technology that often set Time apart. When the magazine was just 1 month old, for example, it carried this report.
The skull of Henry A. Brown was opened under only a local anesthetic, cocaine, and a large brain tumor successfully removed.
In 1931, Time appeared to forecast the widespread use of drugs in non-medical applications.
A very small percentage, so far, of the U.S. population sniff cocaine and heroin, inject morphine, or smoke hashish. But it is certain that drug habits are increasing. In the U.S. South, cigarettes containing hashish or hemp are called muggles.
After a 1926 lecture on the possibilities of what it called radio television, Time had this to say.
The possibilities. Synchronized with sound-carrying radio, the sight-carrying radio might someday bring before the eyes of a man in Kankakee, Illinois, the coronation of a king in Westminster. It might enable folk to go to the theater by turning a switch.
But even Time couldn't foresee that a scant 30 years later, those sight-carrying radio waves would bring to the eyes of that man in Kankakee live pictures of a space traveler walking on the moon.
After centuries of dreams and prophecies, the moment had come. Man had broken his terrestrial shackles for the first time and set foot on another world. Standing on the lifeless, rock-studded surface, he could see the Earth, a lovely blue and white hemisphere suspended in the velvety black sky. The spectacular view might well help him place his problems, as well as his world, in a new perspective.
If the next 60 years can bring the same kind of men and accomplishments as those of Lindbergh and Armstrong and Salk and Barnard, perhaps that new perspective may yet be achieved. Science and technology can open the doors. But it's still the people, the men and women, who for better or for worse will lead the way. And every year, the one who does the most leading will quite likely become Time's Man of the Year.
And it all came about because the last week of December 1927 was about the slowest news period Time had ever faced. In fact, the week's top story, according to Time, was about a handwritten Christmas message from President Calvin Coolidge to the nation. Time just didn't know whose picture to put on its cover. The leading newsmaker that week seemed to be nobody. The year itself, of course, had been a real zinger. Al Capone was at his peak as Chicago's crime lord, and Lucky Lindy had made his historic flight to France. Well, said somebody, nobody seems to recall just who, it's the first issue of the year. Instead of a man of the week, let's pick a man of the year. It seemed like a nice little idea, and the magazine went to press with a cover picture of Lindbergh, and the caption, the man of the year. Incidentally, the man of the year can be a man, a woman, one of each, or two of a kind, or three of a kind, or a group, or a symbol, or a bad guy like Joe Stalin after he signed his treaty with Hitler, or a good guy like Joe Stalin after he fought valiantly against Hitler, or even a machine. But for the sake of brevity, we'll just refer to the phenomenon collectively as simply Man of the Year. All in all, there have been 56 Man of the Year covers on Time. And in the unlikely event that you may have forgotten a couple, here they all are.
Time was when we had fun on the schoolyard swings, when we exchanged graduation rings, one lovely yesterday. Time was when we wrote love letters in the sand, or lingered over our coffee and dreaming the time away. Picnics and hay rides and midwinter sleigh rides, and never apart. Hiked in the country, and there's more than one tree on which I've a place in your heart. Darling, every tomorrow will be complete if all our moments are half as sweet as all our time was then.
Important as the Man of the Year might be, there are still about 51 other Time covers that appear each year, and they're all important. An appearance on the cover of Time is confirmation to the world that you're just about the most important person around, at least for that week. Of course, you might not remain a household word. Renee Fonk made Time's cover, as so did Cornelius Shields and Jeff Fenholt. But for that week, you're the top.
You're the top.
The man who made the most Time covers by far is Richard Nixon, with 64 appearances. And quick, who is the woman with the most covers? Wrong. It's the Virgin Mary, who appeared 10 times, although often only as background to another subject. Sometimes an appearance on the cover of Time can truly be of historical significance. John F. Kennedy first came to national prominence when his picture appeared on Time's cover 3 years before he became president. And so did Jimmy Carter 5 years before he ran. And for show business folk, an appearance on Time's cover can be a press agent's dream. Actress Ally McGraw said recently, "My life didn't even begin until after I made the cover of Time." Perhaps one of the most controversial subjects a magazine can tackle is religion. And in 1966, when Time printed on its cover in bold letters the question, "Is God dead?" it touched off an uproar that has not yet completely subsided. And if anything is more delicate for a family magazine to deal with than religion, it's sex. And nothing came close to the reaction generated over Time's cover story on the Marlon Brando film, Last Tango in Paris. The article featured provocative photographs of Brando and actress Maria Schneider in scenes from the X-rated film, and the reaction was overwhelming. The story drew the largest mail response of any cover story in Time history, over 12,000 letters, and over half of them were from readers who canceled their subscriptions. And speaking of cancellations, if these Time covers look familiar to you, you probably work for the magazine. They are just a few of the covers that were canceled after being in various stages of development when more pressing news stories came along at the last minute. In 1939, after Hitler marched on Poland, a cover on Jack Benny was replaced by Winston Churchill. 800,000 Thomas E. Dewey covers were scrapped for a last-minute change to General Eisenhower when his forces staged the long-awaited invasion of North Africa. When Germany surrendered in 1945, 15 tons of covers featuring Russian General Zhukov were replaced by Adolf Hitler. The election of Pope John Paul caused millions of black hole covers to disappear. The movie Kramer vs. Kramer was divorced from its cover status by late-breaking riots in Iran. And Star Wars was zapped by Menachem Begin when he became Prime Minister of Israel.
And so it has been from Stalin to Star Wars, from Babe Ruth to Ronald Reagan, from 1923 to 1983, it was indeed the most amazing 60 years in history. And when Time magazine summed up the occurrences surrounding the release of the Iranian hostages at the same moment President Reagan was being inaugurated, it may have unknowingly also summed up the happenings of its own first 60 years. It was an extraordinary conjuncture of events, compressed almost beyond credibility. It has been indeed the time of our lives. I'm Jason Robart.